the dare that started it. All the gallery opening was winding down, champagne flutes emptying as the crowd thinned. Josephine Winters lowered her camera, satisfied with the shots she'd captured for the evening. As a freelance photographer specializing in high society events, she had developed an eye for authentic moments amid the artifice of Seattle's elite gatherings. Another successful night of capturing the rich and famous? Olivia leaned against the wall beside her, amber liquid swirling in her glass. "Just doing my job," Josephine replied, tucking a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. "These people pay well for flattering photos." Speaking of the rich, Damon joined them, his designer suit marking him as more attendee than staff. "Did you hear Theodore Blackwood is finally back in the country?" Josephine's eyebrow raised slightly. The name carried weight in the tech world. The founder of Nexus Innovations, whose revolutionary AI systems had made him billions before his 30th birthday. Unlike most tech celebrities, Blackwood was notoriously private, rarely appearing in public and never with romantic partners. "I heard he doesn't let anyone photograph him," Olivia said. "Apparently he fired his entire PR team when they suggested a profile piece." "The man's a ghost," Damon agreed. "Brilliant, but practically a hermit. They say he hasn't dated anyone in years." Josephine scrolled through her camera roll, only half listening. Unlike her friends who had been born into the social circles they now occupied, she had worked her way into this world through talent and determination. "I bet even you couldn't get close to him, Joe," Olivia said suddenly, a mischievous glint in her eye. "With all your charm and camera tricks." "I don't chase subjects," Josephine replied. "Besides, what would be the point?" Damon's laugh held a challenge. "The impossible shot? The person no one can capture? Isn't that what you're always talking about, finding the truth behind the facade?" "Blackwood's facade is reinforced steel," Olivia added. "I'd wager you couldn't even get him to smile for a photo, let alone anything more." Something flickered in Josephine's chest. That familiar spark when someone told her she couldn't do something. At 32, she'd built her reputation on capturing the genuine emotions of people who spent fortunes hiding them. "What exactly are you suggesting?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "A wager," Damon said, lowering his voice. "Get close enough to Theodore Blackwood to photograph the real man behind the myth. Not just a paparazzi shot, something genuine. And if I succeed—" "That exhibition space you've been eyeing downtown," Olivia said. "My father owns the building. It could be yours for 6 months, rent-free." Josephine's breath caught. A solo exhibition in that space could transform her career from event photographer to serious artist. "This is ridiculous," she said, but didn't immediately refuse. "Is it?" Damon challenged. "Or is it just the kind of impossible that you specialize in?" Later that night, as Josephine entered her modest apartment overlooking Puget Sound, she found herself researching Theodore Blackwood. 36 years old, a prodigy who'd coded his first program at 9, notoriously private. "This is insane," she murmured to herself, even as she drafted an email to her contact at Nexus Innovations, inquiring about photographer positions for their upcoming charity event. Sometimes the perfect shot required stepping into frame herself. Masks and meetings. The Nexus Innovations Charity Gala transformed the Seattle Art Museum into a technological wonderland. Interactive light installations responded to guests' movements, and holographic displays showcased the company's latest humanitarian projects. Josephine adjusted her press badge, feeling oddly exposed without her camera as a barrier. Tonight, she was here as a journalist for a tech blog, a cover identity arranged through connections that owed her favors. Her target had yet to appear. Theodore Blackwood's attendance at his own company's event wasn't guaranteed, according to the whispers around her. She sipped champagne, observing the crowd with a photographer's trained eye. "He won't come down here," a voice said beside her. Josephine turned to find a woman in a tailored suit, her expression knowing. Eleanor Vega, she introduced herself, Chief Operating Officer at Nexus. Josephine Winters, Seattle Tech Quarterly. Eleanor's smile suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. Mr. Blackwood prefers to observe from his private viewing room. He finds crowds overwhelming. Josephine followed Eleanor's subtle glance upward to a darkened balcony overlooking the main floor. That seems rather detached for a humanitarian event. Theodore's contributions speak for themselves, Eleanor replied. His presence is unnecessary for the good his technology does. I'd argue that connection is exactly what humanitarian work requires, Josephine countered, her genuine belief slipping through her cover. Technology without human touch becomes cold calculation. Eleanor studied her with renewed interest. An unusual perspective from a tech journalist. I photograph people before I write about their innovations. Something shifted in Eleanor's expression. Perhaps you'd like to share that view with Mr. Blackwood. He's been developing an ethical framework for our latest AI system. Before Josephine could recover from her surprise, she was being escorted toward a private elevator. The wager floated, distantly in her mind, overshadowed by unexpected opportunity. The viewing room was minimalist and dimly lit. A man stood with his back to her, gazing through one-way glass at the glittering event below. He didn't turn as they entered. Theodore, this is Josephine Winters. She has an interesting perspective on the human element in technological advancement. He remained silent, and Eleanor departed with a reassuring nod to Josephine. Theodore Blackwood was taller than his rare photographs suggested, his posture straight but not rigid. When he finally turned, Josephine was struck not by his appearance but by the intensity of his focus. His eyes, deep brown under dark brows, assessed her with uncomfortable precision. "You're not a tech journalist," he said simply. Josephine's carefully constructed cover story evaporated under that direct gaze. "I'm a photographer," she admitted, surprising herself with the truth. "Why the deception? Your COO brought me here." "I didn't deceive her. Not her. Everyone downstairs. That badge, that role you're playing." His words weren't accusatory but observational. Josephine considered her options, then chose an unexpected path. "People show different faces in different contexts. I wanted to see which one you present at your own events." A flicker of something, amusement, interest, crossed his features. "And what have you observed, Ms. Winters?" "That you prefer to watch rather than participate. That you create distance between yourself and your own accomplishments." She gestured toward the window. "That perhaps the most interesting photograph would be not of Theodore Blackwood among the crowd, but of Theodore Blackwood watching the crowd." He approached, stopping a careful distance away. "Most people come looking for the man behind Nexus. They want secrets, weaknesses, or confirmation of rumors." "I'm interested in contrasts," Josephine replied. "The space between public perception and private reality." Theodore studied her for a long moment. "Have dinner with me," he said abruptly. "Not here. Somewhere quiet." The wager pulsed in Josephine's mind, but something else stirred alongside it. Genuine curiosity about this man, who seemed simultaneously confident and uncomfortable in his own skin. "I'd like that," she said, and meant it. Entangled truths. 6 weeks passed in a blur of private conversations and unexpected revelations. Dinner had become a series of meetings, always in secluded restaurants or Theodore's minimalist penthouse with its panoramic views of the Olympic mountains. Josephine found herself leaving her camera behind more often, preferring to experience their encounters directly rather than through a lens. Theodore wasn't what she had expected. The coldness attributed to him in gossip columns was actually a careful precision, a deliberate way of moving through a world that seemed to overwhelm his senses. He spoke about his work with quiet passion, describing the neural networks he designed as finding order in chaos. When he listened to her describe the emotional impact of photography, his attention was absolute. Tonight, they sat on his balcony, the city lights creating a private constellation around them. Theodore handed her a glass of wine, their fingers brushing. "Why did you agree to meet me that first night?" Josephine asked, the question that had lingered between them. Theodore considered this with his characteristic thoughtfulness. "You looked at me, not at what I represent. It's unusual in my experience." The weight of her deception pressed against her chest. The exhibition space Olivia had promised seemed increasingly meaningless compared to the trust developing between them. "I need to tell you something," Josephine began. Theodore's phone chimed with an alert. His expression changed as he read the message. "I have to go to Singapore, tonight." "Tonight? For how long?" 3 weeks, minimum. A critical issue with our system implementation." He set down his glass. "Come with me." Josephine blinked. "To Singapore? And after that, to our research facility in New Zealand." His gaze was direct, vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen before. "I find myself reluctant to return to solitary travel." The invitation hung between them, weighted with implications neither had voiced. "Theodore, I have commitments here. Cancel them." There was no command in his voice, only quiet hope. "Or don't. But I've learned more about connection in these weeks than in years preceding them." Later, Josephine would question her response, whether it was the wager, genuine emotion, or some complex tangle of both that made her say yes. The next 3 months unfolded across continents. Singapore's humid nights gave way to New Zealand's sweeping landscapes, then to the technological wonderland of Tokyo. Theodore worked intensely, but always made time for her, sharing meals and conversations that deepened their connection. In Kyoto, during cherry blossom season, Theodore took her to a private garden. Under falling pink petals, he asked her to marry him. "This is sudden," she whispered, though it didn't feel sudden after their whirlwind intimacy. "I've calculated the probability of finding someone who understands me as you do," he said with characteristic directness. "It's vanishingly small. I don't want to lose that." Caught in the beauty of the moment and the genuine emotion in his usually composed expression, Josephine said yes. The ceremony was simple. A private affair in a small Japanese temple with only the necessary witnesses. No photographers, no press, no announcements. Just 2 people and promises exchanged under ancient beams. That night, as they lay in their hotel suite overlooking Kyoto's temple district, Josephine's phone buzzed. A message from Olivia. "How's the Blackwood project going? Time's running out. On our wager?" Theodore noticed her expression change. "Is something wrong?" The months of genuine connection crashed against the original deception. Josephine took a deep breath. "There's something I need to tell you about how we met." She explained the wager, the exhibition space, the initial motivation that had led her to the charity gala. With each word, Theodore's expression grew more still, his eyes more distant. When she finished, he simply rose, dressed silently, and walked to the door. "Theodore, please." "I need to think," he said, his voice hollow. Then he was gone. The hidden portrait dawn broke over Kyoto, painting the ancient city in golden light. Josephine hadn't slept, alternating between pacing the suite and staring at her phone. Theodore hadn't returned. A knock at the door sent her rushing across the room, but instead of Theodore, she found a hotel attendant with an envelope. Inside was a key card and an address. No note, no explanation. The address led her to a traditional machiya on a quiet street. The wooden townhouse seemed centuries old from outside, but the keycard unlocked a surprisingly modern interior. The first floor contained nothing but screens, dozens of them displaying code, data visualizations and images that shifted and flowed. Josephine ascended the stairs to find another floor of screens, these showing what appeared to be brain scans, alongside cascading numbers. On the third floor, she found Theodore. He sat cross-legged on a tatami mat, surrounded by more screens and scattered papers covered in handwritten equations. He didn't look up when she entered. "What is this place?" she asked softly. "My private research facility," he answered, his voice flat. "The work I don't share with Nexus or anyone else." Josephine approached cautiously, taking in the strange patterns displayed around them. "Research on what?" "Neural divergence, specifically my own." He finally met her gaze. "I have a condition called synesthesia, an extreme form. My neurological wiring creates cross-connections between senses that most brains keep separate." Understanding began to dawn. "You experience the world differently. I see sounds, taste colors, feel mathematical equations as physical sensations." His hands moved through the air, tracing invisible patterns. "Data flows have textures. Voices have shapes and hues. It made me an outsider as a child, but it also enabled me to conceptualize neural networks in ways others couldn't." He gestured to a screen displaying a brain scan. "This is me, processing complex information. This is why I avoid crowds. Too much sensory input becomes painful." Josephine remembered his discomfort at the charity gala, his preference for quiet restaurants, the dimmed lighting in his homes. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because people who know tend to see only the condition, not the person." His voice held no accusation, only tired resignation. "They either treat me as broken or as some kind of savant. Neither allows for normalcy. And I saw you normally because I didn't know." "You saw me," he confirmed simply. "Now I wonder if you were truly seeing me, or just looking for the perfect angle for your exhibition." The pain in his voice cut deeper than anger would have. Josephine knelt beside him, not touching, but close. "The wager brought me to that gala," she admitted. "But it's not why I went to Singapore or New Zealand or married you in a temple yesterday." Somewhere along the way, the photograph stopped mattering. "How can I believe that?" Instead of answering immediately, Josephine pulled out her phone and opened her gallery. She handed it to him. "These past 3 months, I've taken exactly 6 photographs. None of you." Theodore scrolled through the sparse collection: a sunset in Singapore, Mount Cook in New Zealand, a temple in Kyoto, a street musician, a child with a balloon, and a stray cat. "I stopped seeing the world through my lens because I wanted to experience it directly. With you." She took a shaky breath. "For the first time in my career, I chose not to capture moments, but to live them." Theodore set down the phone, his expression unreadable. "I need time." Josephine nodded, rising to leave, but his voice stopped her. "There's something else you should see. The final floor." The 4th floor held only one screen, a massive display showing what appeared to be a 3-dimensional model of neural connections, pulsing with light and color. "This is what I'm really working on," Theodore said quietly. "A way to translate how I perceive the world so others can understand it. Not to fix my brain, but to build a bridge." As Josephine watched the beautiful alien patterns shift and flow, she understood what he was really saying. Despite everything, he had been trying to find a way to connect. Refocused lens. 1 month later, Josephine sat alone in her Seattle apartment, sorting through years of photographs spread across her dining table. Outside, autumn painted the city in amber and crimson, but she barely noticed the transformation. After Kyoto, Theodore had asked for space. He'd arranged her return to Seattle while he remained in Japan, promising only that they would talk when he was ready. The exhibition space that had sparked everything went unclaimed. Her phone chimed with a message from Olivia. "Dinner tonight? We need to talk about the wager." Josephine didn't respond. The bet that had once seemed exciting now felt hollow and juvenile. Instead, she continued organizing her portfolio, separating images into two piles: work that captured superficial beauty and photographs that revealed deeper truths. The knock at her door was soft, but insistent. When she opened it, Theodore stood there, looking tired but composed. "May I come in?" he asked. Her apartment, which had always felt adequate before, suddenly seemed small and ordinary as he entered. He glanced at the photographs covering her table. "You're reorganizing your work," he observed. "I'm reassessing what matters," she corrected. "Why I became a photographer in the first place." Theodore nodded, his gaze moving across the images. "And what have you discovered?" "That I started taking pictures to find truth, not to stage it. Somewhere along the way, I began manipulating reality instead of revealing it." She gestured to the larger pile. "These are technically perfect, but emotionally empty. And these?" He indicated the smaller collection. "Imperfect, authentic, moments that matter." Theodore picked up one photograph. An elderly couple dancing in a public square, slightly blurred but radiating joy. "This is how you see the world, at its best." "Yes." He set down the photograph carefully. "I've spent this month trying to understand why your deception hurt so deeply. I realized it wasn't the wager itself, but that it made me question everything that followed." "I can't undo how we met," Josephine said quietly. "But everything after that first night was real. I stopped playing a role. I started being myself." "I believe you," Theodore said, surprising her. "Because I did the same. With you, I stopped calculating appropriate responses and simply responded." He reached into his jacket and removed a small object, a data drive. "This contains the work I showed you in Kyoto, the neural translation project." He placed it on the table beside her photographs. "I'm presenting it at the International Neuroscience Conference next month. I'd like you to document it." Josephine stared at the drive. "You want me to photograph your presentation?" "I want you to help me show the world what I see, not as a favor or to make amends, but because your eye for truth is exactly what this project needs." He hesitated. "And because I miss seeing the world with you." The invitation wasn't forgiveness exactly, but something more valuable: a path forward, a chance to build something honest from a flawed foundation. "What about us?" Josephine asked, the question that had haunted her for weeks. "That's more complex," Theodore admitted. "Legally, we're still married. Emotionally, we need to rediscover each other without pretense. And if we can't, then we'll have created something meaningful together professionally, even if we failed personally." His directness remained unchanged. "But I wouldn't be here if I thought that was the most probable outcome." Josephine considered the man before her. Brilliant, literal, intense, and strangely hopeful despite everything. She thought about the exhibition space that had once seemed so important, and the connection that had unexpectedly taken its place. "I'd like to help you with your project," she said finally. "And I'd like to try again, without wagers or masks." Theodore extended his hand, and she took it, feeling the familiar texture of his skin against hers. "I should warn you," he said, the faintest smile touching his lips, "that presentations feature very unflattering lighting." Josephine laughed, the sound breaking the tension between them. "I've never been interested in flattering light. I prefer illumination that reveals what matters." As the autumn sun cast long shadows across her apartment, they began talking about neural pathways and visual translation, about perception and reality. Not a fresh start, but a continuation with clearer vision. Two people seeing each other truly for the first time.